An approach is a way of looking at teaching and learning. Underlying any language teaching approach is a theoretical view of what language is and how it can be learned. Good day everyone, I am teacher Melanie, your teacher for today's lesson. And today we will be talking about approaches in language teaching. But before we proceed to the discussion, let us first read the objective for today's lesson. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to define different approaches in language teaching, identify examples of these approaches in the classroom, and express insights of different language approaches. First approach is the communicative approach. The communicative approach is based on the idea that learning language successfully comes through having to communicate real meaning. When learners are involved in real communication, their natural strategies for language acquisition will be used. These will allow them to learn to use the language. The role of teacher communicative approach tends to be learner-centered, which means that the teacher acts as a facilitator and monitor who models successful communication, establishes an environment that encourages communication. The students do much of the speaking and often work in pairs or in groups to complete tasks cooperatively. In communicative language teaching, it is not the teacher's job to prevent and correct all errors, but to act as counselor who models effective communication. Debates and discussions are a good example of communicative approach in classroom. These activities enable learners to share their own views on topics and use their communicative resource to convey ideas, make points, and agree and disagree with others. The next approach is called language scaffolding. Teachers and other adults modify their language to match the language level of students. This type of modification is called scaffolding. All students, including adults, learn better when the teacher scaffolds or adjusts his or her instruction to the level of the students. According to this approach, effective communication occurs when an adult speaks in a language a child can understand, yet still challenges learning. The goal is to speak slightly above the child's level so he or she can learn and grow. The teacher may change a long and complicated sentences into simpler, shorter to the student, or the teacher may use words that mean the same thing and may also provide explanation by providing background information. Scaffolding is when a teacher uses prompting, questioning, and elaboration in the class. Effective student-teacher interaction also promotes learner confidence when it is geared to students' language competency level. Next is the cooperative language learning. Cooperative language learning is part of a more general instructional approach known as collaborative learning. Cooperative learning is an approach to teaching that makes maximum use of cooperative activities involving pairs and small groups of learners in the classroom. Cooperative learning allows students to work together to reach common goals. Cooperation means more than putting students in groups. It means group participation in a project in which the outcome results from common effort. The goal is shared and each person's success is linked with every other person's success. According to Kagan 1994 and Slavin 1995, some methods which have been successfully applied in the classroom are round table for writing, Zigzag in reading, and think, pair, share to develop oral skills. For instance, think, pair, share in the classroom or in an English classroom. Students will be tasked to read a story in English history literature. In order to analyze the text, each expert's group reads 1 to 2 entries and summarizes the plot line, as well as analyzing important information that they have learned about historical periods and lifestyle of the times. The expert then shares what he or she has learned with the jigsaw group. The next approach is a situational approach. According to the situational approach, to ensure that the language is being taught in realistic, all words and sentences must grow out of some real situation or imagined real situation. Thus, the meaning of words are tied up with the situations in which they are used. For instance, the learner knows the meaning of the word blackboard not because they have looked into a dictionary, but because they have learned the word in situations by hearing commands such as look at the blackboard, clean the blackboard. This example stresses the association between word blackboard and the action looking at it or cleaning at it. These are the key characteristics of a situational approach. The target language is the language of the classroom. Language should be realistic. Materials are introduced orally. New language points, word sentences are introduced from real imagined situations. For instance, a teacher may ask the students to give their ideas about the difference between the pictures posted for formal and informal communication. By looking into the illustration, students will connect it to their experiences. They can share insights orally because of their prior knowledge in real life. The next approach is the functional notional approach. There are two basic concepts in functional notional approach. First is the function. Functions are the communicative purposes for which we use the language, according to Newman 1988. Examples of functions are evaluating, persuading, arguing, informing, grading, questioning, requesting, and even expressing emotions. Another concept is the notion. Notions are the conceptual meanings of objects, entities, state of affairs, logical relationships, and so on, expressed through language, according to the same author. A notion can be a concept or idea. Examples of notions are the time, movement, nouns, pronouns, when, where, verb, dogs, adjectives, and prepositions. So this approach holds that the classification of skills levels should be based on what people want to do with language, such as the functions of language, or what are the meanings that people want to convey the notions. Functional notional approach to language learning places major emphasis on the communicative purpose of speech or speaking skill. This is what people want to do or accomplish through speech. So functional notional approach helps the learners to use real and appropriate language for communication. If you're using this approach in the classroom, you're likely to engage the learners in diverse activities. You may engage the learners in free conversations, debates about weather, current affairs, TV shows, and public media. Teacher acts as a film producer and will remain the dominant role of the stage. Without the teacher, the student activity will be confused. Functional notional approach helps learner to use real and appropriate language for communication. The next approach to language learning is the multi-skill approach. A skill-based approach is also called multi-skill approach. In this approach, the teacher talks less and encourages students to participate more. Teaching multiple skills in one class is a challenge, but it is a fun challenge. It involves teaching multiple skills in English such as writing skills, listening skills, speaking skills, and reading skills, as well as the culture and grammar. A team-based approach is one of the most common ways of teaching multiple skills. The next approach is the content-based approach. Content-based approach is an approach to second language teaching in which teaching is organized around the content or information that the students will acquire, without separating it from the language itself. Language becomes a tool for learning new things instead of the topic itself. According to these principles, classrooms should focus on real communication, and exchange of information. This helps the student ensure links with reality and their own experience and provide us with the most certain way of teaching language in communication. So there are key characteristics of this content-based approach, such as it uses the content from other fields of disciplines, builds on the students' previous knowledge, the students are motivated to learn because of relevance, teachers help to scaffold linguistic content, and the language is learned best when used to deliver interesting information. And vocabularies can be easily acquired with contextual cues. So, there are some examples of this content-based instruction in the classroom. So, activities such as teaching students to do something like yoga, preparing a recipe, or folding origami, or activities such as imagining a story or character together with students, or discussing what students did over the weekend. Another approach to language learning is the task-based approach. Task-based language learning is an approach where the planning of learning materials and teaching sessions are based around doing a task. In a task-based approach, students learn by doing. So to understand this concept, imagine if you just study the road rules and the instruction manual for the car. Will you then be able to drive? What about if you learn to drive by actually driving? Well, in the same way, task-based learning is based on the idea that you learn a language by using it rather than by studying its different components in isolation. Task activities are usually rich in language, involving a wide variety of language areas as well as all skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. By definition, a task must involve the processing of information and some kind of communication or interaction. And a task can be something that you do alone or that you can do with someone else or in a group, like practicing the simple or past conditional sentences where the aim of the activity is just to practice one particular aspect of language. In task-based learning, the language content is defined not by grammar syllabus but what the learners need to complete the task. Tasks themselves can reflect real-life situations. For example, in an educational or work context, giving an academic presentation, attending an interview or meeting, applying for a job, or dealing with public things that people need to do every day in different fields like tourism, health services, business, and education. Because it is closely linked to learners' real needs, task-based learning can be highly motivating for students and extremely useful. The next approach to language learning is the participatory approach. Participatory approach is based on solving the learner's problems in real life, using the target language as a tool. Learners bring outside problems into the class. The principles of participatory approach is based on the content, which is taken from the students' lives, experiences, and critical analysis of social and political issues. So participatory approach is a strong version of communicative approach, where the goal of the teacher are to empower the students through language and raise political awareness and helping them advocate for themselves. There are two key components in participatory approach, namely dialoguing and problem solving. Teachers and students engage in dialogue about issues of the students' lives and issues of power in society. So in the problem solving, the teacher identifies the problem based on the dialogue and students work collaboratively to solve the problem. Teacher empowers the students to take action in their own lives and in the world. For instance, the teacher engages the students into an initial discussion about something connected to their lives. The teacher poses a problem and tries to elicit a solution from the student. The teacher leads the student into the best solution. They then decide on a project, in this case, a group letter. The students work together to edit the letters. They will continue editing the project for homework and bring the letters and read them next time. In the end, they will discuss what they have learned from the lesson. That is participatory approach. Another approach to language learning is the differentiated learning. Differentiation is a framework for accommodating different learning styles and capabilities. On a practical level, the goal is to put limited classroom resources and teacher time to the best use for all students. Whether they're visual or verbal learners, social or solitary, slow or quick. Differentiated instruction, by definition, is instruction that is designed to support individual students' learning in a classroom of students with varied backgrounds and needs. So, differentiated instruction is also tailoring your lesson depending on the student's level, needs, and learning styles. So, the use of flexible groupings, different learning assessment, use of collaborative learning, and getting to know your students well are an excellent way for teachers to be successful in differentiating learning. To sum up what we have learned from today's discussion, let us review the different approaches in language learning. First is the communicative approach, then the language scaffolding, the cooperative learning approach, the situational learning approach, the functional notional approach, the multi-skill approach, content-based approach, task-based approach, participatory approach, and the differentiated learning approach. I hope that you learned something from today's discussion, and that is all for today. Thank you so much for listening.